Welcome to the Senior Health Stories. I'm Dr. William Lee, and today I'm honored to be joined by someone whose work has reshaped how we think about nutrition and chronic disease, Dr. Barbara. Great to have you here, Dr. Barbara.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Always a pleasure to join the discussion, especially when it's about something as deceptively simple yet powerful as chia seeds.
Today we're diving into a protocol that sounds almost too good to be true, reducing fat and inflammation in just 7 days by adding one habit to your daily routine. No pills, no crash diets, no high-tech supplements, just chia seeds. And that might raise eyebrows. But the science behind chia seeds is robust. They're not just another superfood to sprinkle on smoothie bowls. Chia acts more like a biological catalyst, triggering shifts in blood sugar regulation, satiety hormones, gut microbiota, and even inflammatory pathways.
We've seen in recent studies, especially a 2024 review from Nutrition Reviews, that chia's unique profile of soluble fiber, plant-based omega-3s, and polyphenols plays a key role in modulating insulin sensitivity and reducing low-grade inflammation. But here's what people often miss: it's not just what you eat, but when and how consistently you consume it. That's the thinking behind this 7-day chia protocol. It's simple by design, short enough to complete without burnout, and structured to align with your body's natural metabolic rhythms.
So whether you're aiming to break through a stubborn plateau, manage post-meal blood sugar, or just feel lighter and clearer, stick with us. We'll walk you through exactly what to do each day, why it works, and how to spot signs that your body is already responding. And if you're serious about using food as medicine, make sure to subscribe to the Senior Health Stories. That way, you won't miss the rest of this protocol or the science that backs it up. So let's take a step back and ask the big question. Why does it feel like losing fat and calming inflammation gets exponentially harder once we hit 35?
It's not just a feeling, Dr. Lee. It's physiology. After our mid-30s, the body enters a phase where low-grade chronic inflammation, what we call inflammaging, starts to rise. This isn't the kind of inflammation you feel with an injury. It's silent, systemic, and it changes how your metabolism works. And what many people don't realize is that this baseline inflammation directly interferes with fat metabolism. It disrupts insulin signaling, making our cells less responsive to glucose, and that means more sugar gets stored as fat, especially around the belly. That's insulin resistance in action, and it's strongly tied to increased fat around visceral organs, not just cosmetic but dangerous. Once that cycle sets in, the body becomes metabolically less flexible. It burns fewer calories at rest. Even small spikes in blood sugar can lead to disproportionate fat storage.
And it doesn't end there. The hormone shifts that accompany chronic inflammation also play a role. Cortisol, the stress hormone, tends to be elevated, especially in people with irregular sleep, emotional stress, or metabolic dysfunction. And high cortisol blocks fat burning, particularly at night. At the same time, leptin, the hormone that tells your brain you're full, becomes dysregulated. You might be full, but your brain doesn't register it. That leads to overeating, late-night snacking, and poor sleep, which further elevates cortisol. It's a feedback loop.
It's like a triangle of trouble: inflammation, insulin resistance, and hormone disruption. And one major contributor that we overlook: the timing and quality of breakfast. Skipping breakfast or starting the day with refined carbs pushes blood sugar into a roller coaster for the rest of the day. When you combine that with poor sleep and chronic stress, the metabolic system essentially goes into lockdown mode. Fat burning is deprioritized, the body clings to reserves. And even if you eat less, your system may not respond with fat loss, it just becomes more conservative.
Which brings us back to chia seeds. This tiny seed isn't a magic bullet, but it can intervene in key parts of that dysfunctional loop. The soluble fiber in chia slows down glucose absorption, helping to stabilize blood sugar and reduce post-meal insulin spikes. The plant-based omega-3s, especially alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, found in chia have been shown to reduce inflammatory markers like CRP and IL-6. That lowers the systemic fire we've been talking about.
Not to mention its effect on satiety. A small portion of chia can expand significantly when soaked, and when consumed in the morning, it promotes a longer sense of fullness. That's crucial in resetting leptin sensitivity over time. And in a 2024 study published in Nutrition and Metabolism, researchers found that participants who consumed 30 grams of soaked chia daily for 12 weeks had significantly reduced waist circumference and improved fasting insulin. Even though weight loss wasn't dramatic, the improvements in how the body processed energy were clear.
So, when we talk about this 7-day protocol, it's not about calorie restriction. It's about disrupting the triangle, reducing inflammation, improving insulin sensitivity, and supporting leptin balance, all by integrating one strategic habit at the right time of day. That's the real key, because after 35, fat loss isn't about pushing harder, it's about getting smarter. And chia seeds, used the right way, can help you unlock that smarter path. In just 7 days, the body can begin to shift its metabolic rhythm if we give it the right inputs. Chia seeds are one of those inputs, but their effects aren't immediate fireworks. They unfold in layers. Each day activates a different mechanism.
The first 2 days are driven by soluble fiber. When soaked properly, chia forms a gel rich in mucilage which slows gastric emptying and regulates glucose absorption. A 2023 meta-analysis published in JAMA Network Open confirmed that increased soluble fiber intake significantly reduces post-meal glucose and insulin spikes, especially when consumed in the morning. That initial regulation lays the foundation. Stable glucose curves mean fewer energy crashes and less compensatory hunger. It also creates a gentler insulin profile, which protects against fat storage.
By day 3, the omega-3 profile of chia begins to take effect. Alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, though plant-based, shows real anti-inflammatory activity. The Oxford Nutrition Review in 2023 reported reductions in cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha within 10 days of ALA supplementation. It's fascinating that something so small could influence inflammatory signaling so early. People often report subtle shifts: less fluid retention, clearer skin, even reduced joint stiffness. These aren't coincidences. Inflammation alters vascular tone, digestion, even mental clarity. The ALA in chia integrates into phospholipid membranes, changing how cells communicate and respond to oxidative stress.
On day 5, we start seeing movement in insulin sensitivity. With consistent chia intake, especially when it replaces processed carbs in the morning, fasting glucose begins to trend lower. A 2024 study in clinical nutrition observed a 6% drop in fasting glucose after 7 days of daily chia supplementation in pre-diabetic adults. The change is partly due to improved beta cell function and reduced hepatic glucose output. Chia doesn't stimulate insulin, it reduces the need for it. That shift alone can impact midsection fat storage and afternoon energy levels. Then, as we move into days 6 and 7, the conversation shifts to hormones, particularly leptin and ghrelin. With more stable glucose and reduced inflammation, the body becomes more responsive to satiety cues.
Leptin sensitivity is closely tied to dietary consistency and inflammation levels. In a short-term 2022 trial published in Appetite, chia seed supplementation was associated with improved satiety and normalized leptin patterns within 1 week. Participants not only ate less but reported less interest in snacking altogether. That's a sign the body isn't operating from scarcity anymore. When leptin signals reach the brain correctly, fat metabolism becomes more permissive. The body stops clinging to reserves. That's the real breakthrough. Fat loss doesn't begin with burning, it begins with safety. When inflammation decreases and metabolic hormones rebalance, the system becomes more willing to release fat and regulate energy.
The beauty of this protocol is how each step reinforces the next. Stabilizing glucose prepares the terrain. Reducing inflammation opens communication. Enhancing insulin response improves nutrient use. And finally, the hormonal shift allows the entire system to reset. 7 days won't transform everything, but it initiates a sequence. It gives the body a chance to respond without being overwhelmed. That's often the difference between a failed attempt and real momentum. A spoonful of chia each morning might look insignificant, but the biology it sets in motion is far from small. By now, it's clear that chia seeds have metabolic benefits, but only when used correctly. Unfortunately, many people approach them the wrong way and end up disappointed or even uncomfortable.
True. The most common mistake I see is treating chia like a detox water. People toss a spoonful into a bottle, sip it through the day, and expect fat to melt off without adjusting their diet, timing, or overall nutrient intake, especially when there's no protein in the equation. Drinking chia water on an empty stomach without any amino acid source leaves the body underfed. Satiety doesn't just come from fiber, it needs a combination of macronutrients. And without protein, you risk muscle catabolism. The body still needs amino acids for maintenance and repair. If you're in a mild calorie deficit but not eating protein-rich meals, it starts breaking down lean tissue. That's counterproductive for fat loss.
There's also the issue of overuse. More isn't better. Some think doubling the chia intake will double the effects, but consuming more than 30 grams a day, especially without soaking it properly, can lead to digestive distress. Chia seeds absorb up to 10 times their weight in water. If consumed dry or in large volume, they expand in the gut, drawing water from surrounding tissues. This can cause bloating, constipation, or the opposite, loose stools, depending on hydration status. People often report feeling heavy or sluggish when they start a high chia routine too abruptly. It's not an allergic reaction, it's mechanical. The gut simply can't keep up with the volume if water intake isn't adjusted accordingly.
Another key factor is timing. A lot of people drink chia water right before bed, thinking it will cleanse overnight. But this ignores how digestion and hormones function in the evening. Cortisol is tapering down, melatonin is rising. Introducing fiber and gel-forming seeds too close to sleep can interfere with gastric rest. At night, gastric motility slows down. The stomach takes longer to empty. If chia is still swelling in the gut during that time, it can cause discomfort, distension, or light reflux, especially in people with sensitive digestion.
Morning or mid-morning is optimal. That's when insulin sensitivity peaks. You're metabolically more active. The digestive system is primed to process fiber and distribute nutrients efficiently. It also sets the tone for more stable hunger cues throughout the day. So how should someone use chia properly for fat loss and inflammation? First, always soak it. 10 minutes at minimum. You want a fully expanded gel before it enters your body.
Second, pair it with protein. A chia smoothie with Greek yogurt or plant protein powder, for example, creates a balanced hormonal response. You'll stay fuller longer, and it protects lean muscle during caloric reduction. Third, respect the dosage. 2 tablespoons, around 25 to 30 grams, is more than enough. Start with less if your fiber intake is normally low, then gradually increase as your gut adapts.
And finally, use timing to your advantage. Mid-morning is ideal for most people. You've rehydrated, your cortisol curve is descending, and you're still early enough in the day to influence metabolic tone. Mistiming, overdosing, and using chia in isolation turn a helpful food into a frustrating experience. But when used with intention, chia becomes a catalyst for deeper metabolic change. It's not about doing more, it's about doing it right. We've talked about mechanisms, mistakes, and timing. Now it's time to bring it all together into a practical roadmap day by day. This 7-day protocol is built to activate different biological responses in sequence, not all at once.
That gradual progression matters. You're not just eating chia for a week, you're using it to guide your metabolism through distinct stages: glucose control, inflammation reduction, insulin tuning, and hormonal reset. Day 1 is about simplicity and foundation. Start with 1 tablespoon of chia seeds soaked in a warm glass of water, about 30 minutes before breakfast. Nothing fancy, just hydration and fiber delivery. That early timing is strategic. The body's insulin sensitivity peaks in the morning, so introducing soluble fiber before your first meal slows glucose absorption and flattens the post-breakfast curve. You're priming the system.
On days 2 and 3, we enhance the mix with half a lemon and a thin slice of fresh ginger. These aren't flavor tricks, they're biochemical agents. Lemon supports bile flow and liver detoxification pathways. Ginger contains gingerol, a compound with mild thermogenic and anti-inflammatory effects. Combined with chia's fiber, this blend helps reduce water retention and support gut motility. Day 4, the timing shifts. Instead of drinking it before breakfast, you take your soaked chia drink at 9 a.m., about an hour after a light meal. This small change cues a different metabolic window. Mid-morning is when cortisol starts to dip and the body prepares for stable energy production. Adding chia here extends satiety from your first meal, reduces grazing behavior, and helps sustain mental clarity without caffeine crashes.
Day 5 and 6, we bring in a new layer, probiotics. Mix your soaked chia with a few spoonfuls of kefir or plain yogurt, dairy or plant-based. This combination activates what I call a gut hormone dialogue. Chia feeds the microbes. Kefir provides the microbes. Together they support short-chain fatty acid production like butyrate, which improves insulin signaling and reduces gut-driven inflammation. People often notice by day 6 that their cravings drop off. It's not willpower, it's metabolic alignment. When blood sugar, gut microbiota, and hormones are working in sync, the desire to snack fades on its own.
Day 7 is where things come full circle. Instead of a drink, you prepare a chia pudding breakfast. Chia soaked overnight with unsweetened plant milk, a teaspoon of ground flaxseed, and low-sugar fruits like blueberries or kiwi. This meal is rich in soluble fibre, omega-3s, antioxidants, and resistant starches. It supports mitochondrial activity, promotes deeper fat oxidation, and keeps leptin signaling active through mid-morning. Important reminder here, never eat chia dry. It must be fully hydrated before consumption. Otherwise, it can absorb fluid in the digestive tract and cause blockages or discomfort.
Every element of this protocol, from timing to texture, serves a physiological purpose. We're not changing ingredients randomly. Each step nudges the body toward better rhythm and efficiency. What looks like minor variation, lemon one day, kefir another, a change in timing, is actually metabolic sequencing. You're guiding the body through fiber adaptation, inflammation relief, improved glucose use, and hormone recalibration in 1 week.
If someone sticks with this routine even just for 7 days, they'll notice something. It might be steadier energy, deeper sleep, or fewer cravings. That's the signal we're looking for. And once you feel it, you realize that food doesn't just fuel the body, it leads it. In health behavior change, most people fail not because they don't care, but because they commit to goals that are too far out of reach. Lose 10 kilos, fix my metabolism, go sugar-free for 3 months. These are overwhelming starting points.
The brain doesn't respond well to uncertainty stretched over long periods. When there's no quick feedback loop, motivation declines. That's why the 7-day frame is powerful. It delivers a sense of accomplishment early. We're not talking about false wins. It's about giving the brain a short, focused task with visible biological signals. More stable mornings, fewer cravings, lighter digestion by day 4. Those are meaningful cues.
And when someone successfully follows the same habit every morning for 7 days, especially a ritual like the Chia protocol, the brain creates a success zone. That's the term behavioral scientists use, an association loop between action and reward. Think of it like a neurological stamp. Once your system registers, I showed up for myself 7 days straight, it becomes easier to keep going. The brain no longer sees the action as foreign, it adopts it as part of identity.
And identity is what drives sustainability. Once someone says, I'm the kind of person who fuels my body with intention in the morning, the inertia of old habits starts to break. That's why this protocol doesn't just give chia seeds a spotlight. It uses them as a vehicle, a daily anchor that sets in motion a series of internal resets. We're talking about homeostasis, not just weight loss. By introducing one consistent behavior at one consistent time, the body begins to rebalance. Cortisol patterns smooth out, insulin receptors respond more clearly, and hunger hormones recalibrate.
It doesn't require drastic restriction or complex biohacks. Just one repeatable step, same time, same action every day for a week, and from there something powerful happens. People don't just change what they eat, they begin to trust their ability to lead change. Confidence in health isn't built by theory, it's built by proof. Proof that you can do something simple and your body listens.
So when someone asks, can a week of chia really shift my metabolism? Our answer isn't based on miracle thinking. It's rooted in how the human system responds to rhythm, consistency, and biological momentum. That's the gift of short-term commitment. It teaches the brain and body to speak the same language. Again, we've covered a lot this week, but if there's one takeaway I hope listeners remember, it's this. Chia seeds are not a miracle cure. They won't fix everything overnight, but used intentionally at the right time, in the right form, they become a surprisingly powerful tool.
That's right. Real transformation doesn't happen in a single day, but 7 days is enough to feel a shift. A more balanced morning, less reactive hunger, better digestion. These are signals. When the body starts whispering that it feels safer, you know you're on the right path, and you don't need to commit to anything long-term right away. Just try it for a week. One small ritual each morning. Write down how you feel by midday. How are your energy levels? Are you thinking more clearly? Sleeping deeper? Are your cravings less impulsive?
Those patterns are your feedback loop. Don't ignore them. Let them help you decide whether this protocol earns a place in your life moving forward. We'd love to hear how it goes. If you've ever tried chia seeds, whether it worked or not, drop us a comment and share your experience. Your story could help someone else make a better start.
And if you know a friend or family member who's been struggling to lose fat or manage inflammation safely, send them this episode. A single shift can open the door to something bigger.
Before we close, don't forget to subscribe to the Senior Health Stories so you won't miss what's coming next. We've got more grounded, science-backed strategies waiting for you.
Thanks for joining us. Take care of your body and give it a rhythm it can rely on. We'll see you again soon.